Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Lily. I am so happy you're here with me today. In today's video, I am going to show you how I add the signature pages to the junk journals. If you've been following me here on YouTube or even on my Instagram page, my crafty Instagram, I'll have that link down below. So if you've been kind of following me on Instagram, I do show a lot of behind the scenes of what I'm currently working on. And right now I am working on 12 new junk journals. They are very similar to my own personal junk journal. So I'll show you that one. This is my personal junk journal, and I decided to make a few of this style of junk journal where they are basically blank and then you just fill it in with all your junky junk or even things from kits that you may have. If you would like to see the series of the junk journal with me videos, I'm going to link that up above so that you can take a look how I do a junk journal with me. I decided I wanted to make a few of that style of journal, and I was only going to make a couple of them, but I had 12 cereal boxes and I thought, well, if I can make one, I can make two. If I can make two, I can make six. I can make 12. And that's what happened. I made 12. And so here is the one that I am going to show you in today's video. I have already added the signatures to the cover, and this is what today's video is going to be about: how I bind papers to create signatures and then sew the signatures to the junk journal covers. Look at this cover. Isn't it gorgeous? I just love the hot pink. I love the animal print. Oh my gosh, it is gorgeous. I am going to show you all of the papers that I have gathered to create 3 signatures. It is going to be a somewhat slow process and it might be repetitive, but this is one of the top questions that I get asked often is, what kind of papers do I use and how do you bind the signatures into the cover? I'm going to cover all of that. Lots of great stuff. This video is created with you in mind based on all of the questions. So I do hope that I've answered all of the questions throughout this video. But if you have any questions, please let me know in the comment section below. I try to reply to my comments within 24 hours. Anyway, I can't believe I made 12 of them. I am so lucky that I don't have blisters on my fingertips because it's 12 journals that I made, each having 3 signatures, and that is 12 times 3, 36 signatures I had to stitch, and I do a 3-hole pamphlet stitch. Anyway, it took me a couple of days, but I got it done. I'm not going to show you all of the journals that I'm working on today. Basically just this one, and then I do bring in another one that I worked on off camera. But at the end of the video, I'm going to create like a slideshow and show you what they look like now that they are all completed. Well, they're all bound. I'm going to add a few little extras, but I'm not going to go over the top on these journals because I want them to be somewhat blank so that you can add your own personal touches to your junk journal. Okay, are you guys ready to get started? Let's go over to the Crafty Loft and let's get busy.
Before we get to work, let me quickly show you how I recently painted the top of my craft table. This beautiful turquoise hue. I love this table and this color so much, so it's going to make working on the background so much more fun. Okay, here are the stack of journals that I worked on. These are 11 journals, the cover and all of the papers that I will be using to bind into the spine of the junk journal cover. I'm going to go through each one quickly. There's only 11 here because I already have the 12th one made, and I will show you that one later on in the video. So once I've selected all of the papers, I separated them into groups of 3. There's about 30 pages or 30 papers. Each signature consists of about 10 papers. And I add the papers to their coordinating cover because they do vary in sizes. Most of the journal covers are 8.5 by 6 inches, but there are a couple that are 8 by 6 inches, and then I believe there's one that's 7.5 by 6, and maybe even 7 by 5. So I have about 4 different sizes. So I still need to trim down these papers, but all of the papers have been selected and they're kind of all the same. I kind of went through my stash of papers and I pulled some beautiful scrapbooking decorative papers and also vintage papers, and I'm going to go and show you each and every type of paper that I'm using on the journal cover that we are going to work on today. And do you remember this one? This is what got me started working on these on these journal covers. I started with 2. And after I did these 2, I discovered that I had more empty pantry boxes, like cookie boxes and cereal boxes, because that's the basis of these covers. They used to be food packaging that I have repurposed to make beautiful junk journal covers. And I'll have that video linked up above for you if you'd like to see how to make your own junk journal cover by repurposing or upcycling an empty cereal box. So a lot of these papers are very similar in all of my little stacks. I had multiples of a lot of papers, but a lot of the vintage papers, I had stacks of those. And so it was really nice to be able to use those papers in these signatures. That's a lot of paper. Each one has about 30. So 12 times 30, that's a lot of paper. 12 times 30 pages. I have decided to work on this fuchsia color, mainly because I really liked how it looked with the turquoise background. It just popped so well. And right now I am loving vibrant colors more than ever before. I mean, I've always loved the color, but pops of these bright colors, I mean, I'm just totally loving it. And then the animal print. Yes, girl, yes. This has to be my favorite cover of all the covers there are. And you know what's funny? My sister commented on this cover and she told me she loved it. And so I invited her to come over so she can make her own cover. And then as she was going through her stash one day in her own craft room, she sent me a video and she says, look what I found in my stash. She has this fabric. We can't remember if she bought the fabric or if I bought it. We shared it with each other. But anyway, she's going to be making her own junk journal cover with her own fabric stash. So I don't have to give up the other piece that I have. Okay, let's go through the papers that I have selected for these journals. A lot of them too, like these smaller papers, are offcuts. I have lined paper. I also have cotton paper, a professional cotton paper, and this was part of like a wedding invitation. And then beautiful scrapbooking paper. And this is vintage spiral notebook paper from the 80s. How cool is that? And vintage ledger paper, more beautiful scrapbooking paper. This is a heavier weight, so I like to use that as the cover for the signature. I'm also using vintage music paper for the cover of signature number 2. Another little offcut piece, a page from a coloring book, more vintage notebook paper, lined notebook paper, and scrapbooking paper, parchment paper. This is professional grade parchment paper, the kind you use for resumes. I love finding those in thrift stores, and that is vintage as well. And so in all of these papers, I have a few boxes of this professional resume paper. One of them is linen, the other one is cotton, and then I also use the parchment paper. Those are so fun. I'm not making or writing any resumes right now, so I'm going to use the paper in junk journals. But it's always such a fun find, so don't pass these up if you see them in the thrift stores. I always seem to come across boxes. More scrapbooking paper. Now, these vary a little bit. As far as the paper goes, it varies a little from my own personal junk journal. In my own personal junk journal, and I will show you my journal up ahead, I used all scrapbooking paper. But for these, I thought I would incorporate other papers, a lot of the vintage papers that I have. This one here is the linen, professional linen paper for resumes. It's a really good quality paper, and it has a heavy weight, and so it is perfect for the cover of my signatures. I like to do that, add a more sturdier, more decorative quality paper for the cover of the signatures. I'm pointing out that this journal measures 8 by 6 inches wide. And now the next thing I am going to do is trim down the paper. So measure twice, cut once. I worked on 12 of these, so it wasn't perfect at all, okay? So measure twice, cut once, because there were 36 signatures involved in this creation. I made so many mistakes. I was working well into the night, and I think that I was just tired, and I cut papers the wrong size, and so I had to replenish. And what else did I do? I stitched in signatures upside down, backwards. What else did I do? So cut wrong. So just pay attention because I obviously didn't. I made so many mistakes. And then even when I was sewing the signatures into the spine, I was sewing them incorrectly. And in fact, in this process, I'm going to show you one of those bloopers. It's so funny. So you have to be really focused on what you're doing so that you don't goof up the way I did so many times. So the first thing I'm doing is trimming it down to 8 inches in length, and then I'm also trimming the width to 6 inches wide. These little strips of paper I actually set aside to use them as faux washi strips. I haven't yet used them as faux washi strips, but I've got a bin full of these tiny little strips of paper. I just couldn't get myself to throw them away, and maybe I'll use them in a future video and show you, because if I don't use them, then I'm going to have to get rid of them. But for now, I am hoarding those little strips of paper. And so trimming it down to 8 inches in length. This is a really good trimmer, paper trimmer. I picked it up at a yard sale for $1. Can you believe that? And it's great for cutting multiple pages. It works really well. I know there's a new one. It's more modern. I don't know how old this one is, but it's working fine with, it's working fine for me, especially when I have to trim, 10 papers at a time. I just have to run it across. So it's a rotary trimmer. I just have to run the blade across a few times. Maybe it's time for me to get a new blade. I'm also very carefully looking at the papers to make sure I'm cutting the right edge. There are some edges that I want to preserve. For example, the spiral notebook paper that I tore from the coil. I want to leave that raggedy edge on the paper. I don't want to cut that. So I'm making sure that that part stays intact and that I'm not trimming paper that I shouldn't be trimming. See the top there? I want to keep the top of that page, or, well, it's the top in the signature, but it's actually the side of it when I tore it out of the spiral notebook. So now I am going to make sure I trim across to the width of 6 inches. So I'm lining it up on the grid on this rotary cutter, and I'm just going to cut a little bit so that all of the pages, the signatures are 8 inches by 6 inches, so they fit nicely in the junk journal cover. And I do that to all 3 of these. Some of the ones that I tore, there were some that, like, I wasn't paying attention, and I trimmed them down to 5 inches wide. So after I did that, I was really focused on the the measurements on the rotary trimmer to make sure I didn't do that again, because I had to replace all of those papers again. And it really wouldn't be that bad if your papers are of varying sizes. It makes it more interesting. But where all of my papers were 6 inches wide, and then I had a signature that was 5 inches wide, it kind of looked wonky. So I just set it aside for maybe a future journal. So now I'm inspecting all of the papers, making sure that I trimmed them correctly and that I didn't do too bad. Once I started making all of the mistakes, and I think it was the first night, because I spent 2 whole days stitching these signatures. I called it a day and I went to bed. I'm like, I'll work on it again the next day. I've already added the holes to the signatures, but I'm going to show you how I did that. I did this before, not realizing that I was going to record this process. And so I kind of jumped ahead and punched the holes. I have a template, and it's just a piece of paper, leftover off-cut paper, that I cut to the width and the size of the spine, which is 8 inches in length by 2 inches wide. This is the template that I'm creating so that my signatures line up with the holes that I'm going to create on the spine. This same template I'm also going to use to make the holes in the signatures. The very first thing I do is cut this strip of paper to match the size of the spine, 8 by 2. Then I fold it in half lengthwise and then fold the ends in to meet in the middle, so that there are 3 folds when you open it back up, all lengthwise. Okay, I'm showing you again. I'm bringing in that side. So the right side and the left side, I'm bringing in to meet up in the center. And then I am going to fold it in half lengthwise. And then I'm going to bring in the edges about 1 inch and fold those as well. I now have 3 cross folds and 3 vertical folds. 3 horizontal folds, 3 vertical folds. At every cross where the folds meet, I am going to mark with my pen. So I'm going to make little crosses at those fold marks. You can do this with a pen, with a pencil, so that you can clearly see where the folds meet, the vertical fold and the horizontal fold. So I'm showing you here with my pen, making little crosses. And then I take my pokey tool, and right in the center of each little cross that I've drawn, right over the folds, I am going to poke a hole. When it's all said and done, there should be 9 holes total. 9 holes because I'm doing 3 signatures. This applies to journals with 3 signatures with a 2-inch spine. It changes with every size of spine, and depending on how many signatures you're going to add, your template is going to change. So now I take my little pokey tool and I am demonstrating how I am poking through each of those little markings right in the center of those little drawn crosses. Once I've done that, I've made all of my markings. I am going to position my template very carefully on the spine, on the inside of the spine. And to keep it still, so it doesn't shift or move, I am going to use clips to keep the template in place while I poke the holes. So the hole is going to go through the template, through the cardboard. Be careful when you pierce it through that you don't poke your finger on the other side. So keep that in mind. And we're just going to poke through every single hole or every little marking that is on that template all the way through to the other side. And I do that to the bottom, to the middle, and to the top. Once all my holes are made, I'm going to take that same template and I'm going to begin to add the holes to my signature. There are 3 vertical folds in the template. I am going to take that first vertical fold and center it right in the middle of signature number 1. So signature 1 and the fold from the template, that first fold from the template, will line up. And now I carefully hold it with some clips, and I'm going to pierce with my pokey tool right where the markings are. 3 holes. We are going to do a 3-hole pamphlet stitch. So I'm only going to poke 3 holes. Be careful when you poke it through that you don't poke your hand on the opposite end. And I clip the pages together so that they don't shift. I don't want them moving around, or else we're going to be in trouble. We don't want them moving around because we need to line them up with the holes that we've already made on the spine. Now with signature number 2, I'm jotting here, we've got 1, 2, and 3. Signature 1, signature 2, and signature 3. It's okay. Take notes on your template so that you have a visual reminder of what you're working on. So we are now working on signature number 2. I'm going to clip my papers together so they do not shift. And now right at that center fold, that middle fold, that fold number 2, I'm going to position it carefully right in the center of the signature. And I am going to clip it at the top and the bottom so my template and my papers don't shift. I'm grabbing my pokey tool, poking right through the center. Watch your finger. I always start in the middle, and then I'll either poke the hole through the top or the bottom. Keeping everything in place. I don't want anything shifting. And notice how I flip the pages up and down. Make sure that before you begin to sew it into the signature, they're all facing right side up. Because sometimes I fail to do that, and that's how I get myself to sew in a signature upside down. We're now at signature number 3, which means that we are going to take that 3rd vertical fold from the template and position it very carefully within the inside, the middle of the signature. And I will clip it again so everything is in place and it won't shift and it won't move while I poke the holes. And we're going to do this again. I did this 36 times, you guys. That's a lot of work. I don't know what I was thinking. I remember I once said I wasn't going to mass produce journals like this again, but you know what? I keep doing it over and over again. So poking the holes through, almost got my finger there. And once all the holes are poked through, I don't remove the clips because I still want the papers to stay in place. And now here is my template, and I will set it aside and I will use it again for the next journal that is 8 inches in length and 2 inches wide. And that is how I do the template. And now notice how I'm just pointing out how I am matching up the holes that I've made on the signature to the little holes that are on the spine. And that's really important because as precise as we try to be with the measurements on the template, we need to keep the signatures in that order because they're slightly different. And so you don't want to take signature number 3 and put it in the holes that you've made for signature number 1 because they may not line up. It appears that they may, but they won't. So signature number 1 goes to the holes you've made for the first set of holes, and then signature 2 for the second set of holes, and the third signature for the third set of holes. I am using a darner needle. That's just what the needle is called. And it has a big eye. I want to make sure that it's big. I don't want to fuss over threading a needle. So the needle is about the size of the pokey tool. Nice and big and easier to handle. I'm also using a very sturdy thread. This is a thread that I picked up at the thrift store. It is nice and sturdy. It's like a nylon thread. Super sturdy. So use something sturdy. I also like to use a hemp twine, but not too thick. Use whatever you like. Embroidery floss works perfect for this as well. And we are going to trim the thread to 3 times the length of the cover. So I'm measuring once, twice, and 3 times, and then I cut. Do that 3 times. You're going to need 1 string for each signature. And I pulled it taut before I started working because I want to make sure it doesn't tear, because I will be pulling this taut several times. And the last thing you want is to get it all threaded, and then when you're doing that double knot in the center of the signature, then it breaks. So make sure you test it out first. And you don't want to use anything that is too thick. Just something thin and sturdy. I'm now going to thread the needle, and I'm not going to tie a knot. I'm leaving both ends kind of loose. One will be shorter than the other. As we thread it through the signature, you're going to want to leave a long tail because we need it. We need it so that we can tie the double knot at the very end. I start in the center of the signature. I'm going to pull the needle through, and I'm going to match it up to the center hole, that first row of holes, the first one, the first set of vertical holes, right in the center. Notice how I'm leaving that tail on the right-hand side. I've threaded through on the left-hand side, and now I'm going to go to the bottom hole, thread that through to the inside of the spine. And now I will thread it through the signatures. This is why it's important to leave your papers clipped together so that you don't lose the little hole you've made with the pokey tool. If you don't clip it, the papers are going to shift and you're going to have a hard time finding the hole. I'm now taking the needle up to the very top hole, threading that through, and then I will thread it through the very top hole of the spine. And I'm always checking to make sure I don't pull the tail through. That's what I was doing just a moment ago. Thread it through the top, and now I'm going to go back and thread it through the center hole. Oh, look what I did here. I threaded it through the top middle hole. I did that so many times. You have no idea how many times I did that. So I'm trying, and even when I was doing this demonstration, I was trying to be laser focused, but even then I make mistakes. So now I'm threading it through the correct hole, which is the top one of the first set. I don't even know how to reference the hole, but you know what I mean. I've got 3 vertical rows, so the first one of the first row at the very top. And now I am going to thread it through the center. When I thread it through that center, it's kind of getting a little bit tight. And so you just have to play around with it because you don't want to loosen the string too much. But there. And we're going to do it 2 more times. If I miss anything, please let me know in the description area below. In the comment section below if you have any questions. It's kind of tricky explaining this. So I only hope that my instructions coincide with what you're watching on the screen. I hope that the screen helps, especially if this is your first time, okay? This is one of the easiest methods to sew in your signature. There are so many different ways to bind, to do book binding. This is one of the easier methods. I had a friend years ago and he loved book binding, and he did all the different methods. I mean, so many and very intricate designs. I'm pretty basic. This is hard enough for me as it is. I love working on junk journals, but I will be frank with you. This part of it, I don't love as much, okay? There you go. I said it out loud. Sometimes I just want to do the rubber bands or the elastic cording and just kind of slip in the signature. Sometimes I want to do that. But I also like the way that the 3-hole pamphlet stitch looks. We're now doing signature number 2, threading the string, the needle right through the center, keeping the tail. Don't want to lose that tail. So I'm carefully pulling it out from the spine and now threading it back in from the bottom middle hole, pulling the needle through, and then stitching it or sewing it right through the bottom pokey hole from the signature. Sometimes it can get really tricky where your papers aren't shifting. However, your needle sometimes won't go through all of the papers. And so you just have to be patient and just be careful until you find where the pokey tool is to thread your needle. Going through the top and then reinserting down that middle hole. When I reinsert the needle through that middle hole, I want to make sure I don't pierce the string that's already gone through it. And I call that splitting the thread. I don't want to split the thread. What happens if you split the thread, you're going to have to start over because it'll create a knot. So if you've done this, maybe you know what I mean. It's taking your needle thread and then piercing it right through the other thread. I hope that makes sense. If that happens, you're going to have to pull the thread out and start over again. Otherwise, you won't be able to smoothly pull it through to tie your knots at the end because it's going to create knots. I know that sounds so confusing. And if it's never happened to you, it's not going to make any sense. But if it's happened to you, you'll know what I'm talking about. So just try not to split your thread is all I could say. Sometimes you'll lose the thread from the needle, and that's why there's no knots. That's why they're both loose ends. So if your thread comes out of your needle, you can easily rethread it. And this is where it gets tricky because as you're stitching the signature to the spine, it becomes somewhat tight, but you can lift your book up and kind of see where that pokey hole is so that you can thread it through. I want to make sure that I have the left and the right strings opposite of that center string. So there's the center string that runs right down the middle of the signature. But I want to take the left end and the right end. I want to make sure they're on opposite ends of that middle string so that I can do a double knot. And this will keep everything secure. I pull taut to make sure that the string isn't loose on the outside of the spine or on the inside of the spine. So I'll kind of strum it like I would guitar strings right here to make sure it's nice and taut. And if it isn't, I will keep pulling taut. Not too tight because these are, I'm sure that if I tried hard enough, I could break these strings. I also don't want to tear the paper. So just give it a nice taut pull and then do a double knot. And that is signature number 2. I clip the top of the signatures just so they don't get in the way of the of the stitching. We're working with a lot of paper here. And now we are going to do it again with signature number 3. Thread the needle, leave both ends loose, one shorter than the other. Thread the needle through the center. And then we're almost there. Yay! I'm so excited. That's how I felt once I was done with the 12th journal. But you know, I was in my craft room, I was listening to my favorite music, and it was actually very relaxing. I had a few days off and I did so much catch up. I played catch up with things that I have been kind of setting aside on the back burner. I hung these beautiful linen curtains in my bedroom, and you know, things that I have been kind of procrastinating to do, I took care of those things. I went through my closet and took out lots of things that I'm going to go donate. So just kind of doing a little bit more of spring cleaning, and it was so nice having a couple days off where I can get housework done. You know, things like cleaning my bathrooms and my shower and washing my linens, things like that. I've been really busy lately, so it was really nice to have a couple days off where I can focus on the things that I have been neglecting. So it was really nice too. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to work on these journals as fast as I did. So I'm really lucky that I had that extra time to do that. And even in between this time, I managed to spend some time with my grandbabies. So that was nice. I was on grandma duty one of those days. I will always make time for my family, especially my daughters and my grandbabies. Okay, pulling the last string taut, making sure on the other side that they're nice and taut. I strum them like guitar strings. And then on the inside, the strings are on opposite ends of that center string. It'll keep everything together. I also check the inside of the cover to make sure that the signature isn't loose. So even though it'll be taut on the outside, take a look to make sure it's also taut on the inside. And ta-da! That was signature number 3. Was that exciting? It was repetitious, okay, but I wanted to make sure that I clearly showed how to do the 3-hole pamphlet stitch with 3 signatures. And did you notice that there are 3 signatures? I typically only do 2 signatures in the junk journals that I make. Why? Because I don't want to sew more than I need to. When I first started making junk journals, there was one journal where I did 12 signatures. I don't know what I was thinking. And then there was another where I did 6 signatures. Don't ask me what I was thinking. And after a while of trying out so many different styles of junk journals, I found something that worked for me. So you need to find what works for you. I like working with junk journals that are 8.5 by 6 inches. I like working with spines that are typically about 1.5 or 1 3/4 inch wide. So this took me out of my comfort zone a little bit, especially with the 3 signatures. Adding 3 signatures to 12 journals, that was overkill. Will I do it again? Possibly. I'm pretty sure I will do it again. I am now, and I highly recommend that you flip through the pages, because there were a couple of journals that I had stitched in, and when I was flipping through the pages, they were upside down. Some of them. Some papers were upside down, and that meant that I had to start all over again. So flip through your page. Check your papers before you sew in the signatures, and check your papers after you've sewn in the signatures. This is one of the journals this is how when I started binding or sewing the signatures, this is the one I started with. And then I realized, oh my gosh, I'm supposed to show you how to do this. So then I stopped what I was doing so that I could record this video. This one I even got fancy and added beads in the back strings. I had never done that before, but I thought that was cute. And so cute. This one too has the 3 signatures. This one I made slightly different. I used slightly different papers. I ran out of my hand stained papers. And so I had to hurry and make some. If you watched me on Instagram, you saw how I made my own DIY ink color spray. I'll link that video for you up above. That is how I stain my own copy papers, and I make them nice and grungy like this one. So I had a few left and I was able to add them into this signature, but there are other journals that may not have some of my grungy DIY inked papers. I know, I forgot. But then I made a few and I was able to add some to the last few journals that I made. But that was fun. Grungy papers. If you want to see how to make grungy papers too, I will have that video linked for you up above. Please let me know what you think and if you found this helpful. These journals will be available in my Etsy shop, but they're not ready yet. I will announce when they're ready. I'm not going to do too much for them. These are going to be somewhat blank, and that's because I want them to be very similar to my own personal junk journal. And I'll show you my own personal junk journal in just a moment. But I am going to add a few little things, maybe a junk journal charm and maybe some beads on those loose strings. But as far as embellishing the actual papers, the pages, I'm probably not going to do that because I want these journals when they go out to their forever home, I want them to be used. And I'm hoping that you find inspiration in the Junk Journal with Me video series that I have recently created. I'll have that for you up above. But this is my own personal junk journal. And this was a blank journal. When I say blank, is it didn't have any embellishments. And I'm pointing out that I'll have that linked for you up above. The signatures were composed or compiled from scrapbooking papers, and they were all blank, no embellishments whatsoever. This is my 2025 junk journal. And this is what inspired me to create these 12 journals so that you can take your own junky junk or whatever you have and kind of maybe you want to play along with me when it comes time to do a junk journal with me session. And I have a video for this one, and I will have that video linked up above. I mean, I have a whole playlist for junk journal with me, but I will link up above the videos that coincide with these pages. I am having so much fun with this junk journal with me session. I'm trying to do a junk journal with me every week, once a week, because this also helps me to get my documenting down. So once a week is the goal. I am not there yet, but that is the plan. This is the most recent one. I will have that video linked up above for you. But this one was just recently released, and I did an unboxing with Your Creative Studio, and I used their kit for that layout. Oh my gosh, that layout turned out amazing. I love all of the pages. I love going through my junk journal, and I hope that this inspires you so that you can also document and journal. So yeah, that should be fun. So that's what I'm trying to say. I'm not going to do any big embellishments on the new junk journals. They're going to be pretty blank, but it's going to be so much fun. I would love for you to journal along with me during my journal with me sessions. And look at all the fun junky junk that I get to use. So much fun. And then I may decorate the cover. On mine, I added a frame and then a sticker with my letter L. And then I glued some florals. This is a beautiful charm that my sister gave me. And then you see how I only used 2 signatures? Yeah, because that's usually what I like, 2 signatures. But because the journals that I'm working on right now, most of them have a 2-inch spine, it just, 3 signatures looked better than the 2. I mean, there's so many reasons behind why I did that, and also to try something new. Oh my gosh, I love this hot pink journal cover. Look how beautiful it looks with the turquoise background. You guys, thank you so much. Don't go away because I'm going to have a few pictures where I'm going to show you the finished journals. Can you believe I got them all done these last couple of days? You guys are awesome. I appreciate you being here. Don't forget to subscribe, like my video, and share this video with your family and friends. You guys take care, and I will see you next time. I will leave you with these images of these beautiful 12 journals. Bye!